Hello, and thank you for joining me on the Wine Guild. This is our first episode on wine and history. So I hope you enjoy it. Please sit back, relax. I promise it won't be long, as none of my videos are long. But I hope I will show you some interesting facts about American history on this episode, early American history, and how the impact of wine and what it had on that particular time in our country's history. So as always, I ask you to subscribe, please like, and tell me what you think, comment below. But let's get right into it and talk about a little bit about early American history and wine. This episode will be from 1607 to 1829. Enjoy. From the moment the first Englishmen set foot on the North American continent, producing wine was at the forefront of the minds of the English crown and colonists alike. In 1607, when the Jamestown Virginia colony was in its infancy, most believed the successful cultivating of grapes and the vinting of wine would be crucial to the colony's survival and profitability. First and foremost, wine was a safer drink alternative to the water sources available to the colony. Second, if the colony could successfully produce decent wine that could be shipped back to Europe, the profits of both the crown and the colony's private investors would be huge. Evidence supporting the conclusion that wine production was a goal of the crown can be found in the correspondence between King James I and Governor Watt. The king wrote to Governor Watt instructions to plant vines in abundance. The famous Captain Smith of Jamestown recorded in his journal that the settlers from the first voyage produced 20 gallons of wine from wild hedge grapes. In 1623, the Virginia legislature passed a resolution requiring every male who was at least 20 years old to plant a quarter acre of vines. And in 1658, the colony of Virginia offered 10,000 pounds of tobacco for anyone who could make 2 tons of wine from grapes grown in the colony. To the north, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the Pilgrims arrived at Plymouth and were greeted with wild grapes growing everywhere. Similar goals as the Virginia colony, as well as the religious belief that wine was for the reverend, motivated the Pilgrims to attempt winemaking from naturally grown grapes. So was wine served at the first Thanksgiving? Probably not. The vinting efforts were documented failures, and no accounts of those who actually attended mentioned wine being on the menu. However, the efforts continued. The evidence of Massachusetts Governor John Winthrop granting land rights to an island in Boston Harbor in 1632 on the condition that a vineyard be planted. With attempt after attempt of making decent wine failing with indigenous grapes, the colonists eventually accepted the reality that they would have to rely on imported wines from Europe. At this point in time, the most popular wine in the colonies was Madeira. Madeira was a fortified wine imported from Portugal. Fortified wines is a wine mixed with distilled liquor, usually brandy, The mixture made the wine durable and more apt to make the long journey across the Atlantic without spoiling. In July of 1776, the signing of the Declaration of Independence was toasted by the Continental Congress with a few glasses of Madeira wine. It was clear that Madeira was part of the colonial and now American culture. Joseph Plum Martin, author of a narrative of a Revolutionary War soldier, which is an account of his experience fighting during the war, tells of an incident while stationed in New York City. His regiment came upon an open tavern and found barrels of Madeira unattended. They proceeded to fill their flasks and kegs without any regard for the tavern owner's desire. The commander-in-chief of this army and father of our country, George Washington, was said to have a strong affinity to Madeira. There are accounts of him consuming 3 to 5 glasses each night after dinner while at Mount Vernon. In fact, it was President Washington who commissioned the then Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, to acquire fine wines from France and Italy to create the first presidential wine cellar. It's while building this cellar that Thomas Jefferson further nurtured his love of wine, which carried him his entire life. Jefferson's consumption of wine was legendary, which is evident in the wine bill his presidency left, totaling over $300,000 in today's currency. He also wrote in his autobiography, "Wine is a necessity of life." Benjamin Franklin, one of the most famous founding fathers, was a notorious drinker of all spirits, especially wine, a love he developed while advocating for America in the French court. He wrote, "Wine is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy." Our fourth president and co-author of the Federalist Papers, James Madison, was known for his love of champagne. He considered it the most delightful wine when drank in moderation. Our fifth president, James Monroe, once spent the money Congress gave him to furnish the White House on purchasing 1,200 bottles of Burgundy. And finally, our sixth president, John Quincy Adams, absolutely adored Madeira wine and once conducted a blind tasting where he successfully identified 11 out of 13 types of Madeira. One could certainly say he had a presidential palate. Given these facts, it's hard to deny that wine was a major part of the lives of the men who founded this nation, and therefore wine has always been and should always be considered an American tradition. So, I think we learned a little bit more about our founding fathers and how wine had a significant impact in their lives, and also in the country itself and in its early history. So with that, I would say next time the 4th of July rolls around and people ask you to drink a beer or drink some other type of beverage, why not be patriotic and say, let's drink some wine. Our founding fathers did it, why don't we do it? So with that, I would like to say thank you for watching, thank you for liking and subscribing, and as always, thank you for watching The Wine Guild.